Hey everyone, in this video I want to talk about the star Ocean, the Divine Force. And to be honest with you, I gotta ask, was this game that low? I mean, 69 and 6.5? I took my time to read some of those reviews. Some have solid comments, others just feel as if it is just because it didn't click in the first couple of minutes. The classic, if it is not broken, don't fix it. And yeah, we saw how nostalgia is able to kick in the right place. But looking at this one, what can I say? The story of this game begins with a strong monologue, stating that humans are voracious, and even the limitless cosmos can be consumed by them. Moments later we see one of our main characters in this story, Raymond, captain of the Ydas, whose day is going to change after getting attacked by an unknown ship. This forced the whole crew to abandon the Ydas in escape pods, where Raymond and Chloe land on the same planet, but their pods get hit by something like a thunder. After landing, Raymond tries to assess the situation, but things start to look sour when a giant frog appears. Lucky for him, he's found by Leticia and Albert. After a classic deal where they scratch each other's back, this party gets down to business. Its beginning was interesting, and I will say rather intriguing. Like, why were they attacked? Not once, but twice. And also, why would Leticia agree to work with Raymond with such ease? Unfortunately, this intrigue and interest diminish as the adventure progressed, because its writing is not that great, and ends up falling short. While sure it had an interesting idea between technological and medieval era, everything felt as if the puzzle is just so perfect, or perhaps too simple for its own good, because plots later they find a peculiar disease that is spreading far and wide, but they are able to cure it without that much of a deal. Then the party finds another obstacle, and somehow solve it with relative ease. So the formula was keep throwing plot twists here and there and the party will solve them. Of course, I don't consider this makes the story that bad. I will give it a 7. At the end of the day, it has an interesting narrative between lines. Narrative that I definitely enjoyed, but without a doubt they abuse the power of the script, turning many moments into dull situations. Gameplay wise, it's an action RPG where we have to explore different areas, where each party member has a role within the team. Some focus in magic, physical, combination between magic and physical, healing, etc, etc. Where once we are close enough to an enemy, the battle begins. Each character has something like combos, depending if you press a square, triangle or circle, and we also receive some assistance from Duma, essentially helping to close gaps or startle enemies. In the case of physical characters, it helps, because that is how we get more of those little squares, which indicate how many times we can attack or use moves in succession. As for the combos I mentioned before, each character has something like a skill tree, where we can get different active, passive skills and start upgrades, and as we progress we can unlock new attacks and modify our combos. It is also possible to level them up to deal more damage, heal more HP, or stuff like that depending from the skill. In a summarized way, that is how each character works. As you progress in the game and visit new towns, new gear will be available, and along the way, some options to craft items and equipment. Those are the basics of the game. And yeah, let's not discuss what seems to be tails or not.
Write that down, write that down!
It is rather similar, and I could say that I beat this game in the same fashion way, by pretty much pressing one button. What definitely has to be pointed out is that your allies or the NPCs are just like lemmings looking for a way to end their existence, avoiding explicit words. And it can be a bit frustrating because there is not that much you can do, at least until you recruit Nina, who is pretty much a piece of glass, but capable of healing your team, and different to your damage dealers because she gets extra moves by curing allies, so that is a quick way to get those actions back, in case an enemy is hitting you constantly. And this is when I realized that this game's objective was make the player switch between characters as particular issues arise. It didn't sit that well, but if you don't like the idea of looking at your characters die that much, you can begin the fight with Raymond and then change to Nina. To make this world quite easy, you just need to get the skill to revive, and that's it, easy mode unlocked, because if you're a skilled player you can avoid pretty much everything, and just focus on taking care of your team. and that solves everything, at least in the last section of the game, because I was not going to farm that much to make every character survive everything. Returning to the craft mechanic, if I used it like 10 times, it was too much, you don't really need it. Some subquests were relatively meh, and the bosses is where I could say, they are entertaining to fight. Some attack in a relentless way, and some others can be locked in dumb ways by making your allies deal certain kind of combos. If there is something that grinded my gear so good, is that there are some flying bosses that turn your allies into the most useless NPCs, because they deal little to no damage. As for the exploration, it's pretty much kept as many games in this kind. Almost everything is a straight path. In other words, the game doesn't want you to explore or find different things here and there, but to point you in a specific direction. Okay, I buy the idea, but to be honest with you, there were some moments where it looked like you could find something, just to end up fighting a random item that you probably won't even look. Now this sounds kinda gloomy, but the reality is that I had fun while playing this game. Not as much as I've had with other games, but I enjoy it nonetheless. However, it's worth saying that the experience may feel stagnant after a while, because there are no real changes in its combat mechanics after perhaps the mid of the game, and it is not like it is selling you something to innovate. I will give it another 7. I'll repeat myself, the boss fights are where I had the most fun in this game, because they represent a decent challenge, but some other moments and mechanics can feel stagnant and not really creative. As for the graphics, this is where I talk about the game performance and aesthetics. Issues worth mentioning, just one, the game got frozen. I played the PS4 version of the game in the PS5. Aside from that, I had no other issues. As for the aesthetics of the game, where do I start? It does some interesting things, but also some others are like, yeah well. Worth mentioning that I am not the kind of person that goes after perfect 60 or more FPS, perfectly polished graphics and stuff like that, but try Ace and Square Enix left a not so great taste, because for some reason in many scenes it looks like there is a kind of stain, as if someone had forgotten to take out a layer or move it into a different order of priority. So a lot of times it looks like there is a kind of dust. Mirrors do absolutely nothing, and this is painful to look at, because even Mario 64 does an extraordinary job with that. And there are also weird tones on the skin of some characters, and some of their movements are quite repetitive along multiple scenes, or perhaps overreactive to the situation. There are some unnatural positions while resting the arms. It seems like the clothes are in the way, or the characters were created like that, and then the clothing was adapted. As for the enemies, classic scene I have talked about in several games, repainted enemies to no end. Yep, this game falls kinda low on several points, and I go picky against it because I am not evaluating a non-AAA studio, which is more than understandable that won't be able to pull extraordinary feats. Yeah, this is where I have to draw the line. Those are the painful sides of it, but now let's take a look at the good ones. In general, there are interesting environments with outlandish scenes, which definitely captivated my eye, and this is something quite persistent throughout the whole game. While there are some areas that are kind of classics and not so great layout, it is not like they are executed in a poor way, perhaps a bit forgettable, because you don't really come back to some of those areas, unless it is for a subquest or something like that. What has to be pointed out is that it feels as the game was kind of developed by two teams, because there was an interesting and cartoonish way to present the story, and then poof, the idea is gone, as if it never existed. I don't know, it is kind of confusing and probably the lowest point in this game. I will give it a 6. And last but not least, it's music. Most of the approaches in this game could be summarized as a kind of cinematic track, trying to have a big impact or give a rich ambience. I've said it before, I am not a particular fan of these executions. They can give a lot of life to a game, like they did in Tales of Arise and Castlevania Lords of Shadow, just to give a couple of examples. And this one is no exception, but if there is something that I have to point out is that at first a couple of towns overuse the pan flute, And I gotta be honest, I am getting old and I was falling asleep particularly in those places. Now don't get me wrong, the pan flute is a beautiful instrument in the right conditions, like the best is yet to come from Metal Gear Solid. Or Forest Interlude from Donkey Kong Country 2. I don't think the execution was off here, but I was definitely falling asleep. Aside from those moments, it is an enjoyable OST, and if there is a theme that stayed with me, it was the main combat theme. Everything else can be a bit forgettable, but that doesn't mean it is bad. I will give this section an 8. Star Ocean: The Divine Force final score is a 7. The fact is that it is not bad, but also it is not great. There are numerous poor executions and questionable ideas in between, as if they threw ideas in a random way trying to make it work. I will say that with more time and dedication, these kind of ideas could definitely make a great Star Ocean, but to me it is clear that there are other priorities. I hope you found this video informative. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.